Again, this is for the ACAP Emergency Temporary Approval System. We're going to go over our policy, how to apply, what the approval system covers, what it doesn't cover, and things like that. So looking forward to getting into this. Again, it's recorded, so our hope is to go ahead and post this up on our website afterwards for folks who were not able to attend. And we're looking forward to the good discussion here at the end. So first, our learning objectives today are really just for an introduction, an overview of the policy. Again, what it is not. We're also going to delve in a little bit to the quality assurance and quality control aspects that we're going to be rolling out with this program, and finally how to apply for coverage. And we'll hopefully have a lot of time left for questions. We don't really have a whole lot of content to cover, so most of our time here really should be spent on questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric with the SEC to go over the introduction policy overview for this.
All right, thanks, Jake. As you're well aware, the State Conservation Commission, the ACAP program, we do have a project out there that need BMPs certified. We're bringing this information to you because, and this emergency certification to you because we know that we had to have some kind of stopgap. Otherwise, we're going to have a backlog of projects out there that can't get paid for. And we don't need that. We need this program to be successful. So it's been a lot of work up front between the center, the State Conservation Commission, and now HRG. We brought HRG into the mix to get this emergency certification out here. I will reiterate that this is just a temporary emergency certification. This does not mean you'll have any kind of job approval authority or anything like that, but I'll touch into that a little bit later. So the certification will slowly be replaced as soon as we get our practice approval system set up. So as soon as that practice approval system is set up, this temporary service will go away. And we want to put it on the conservation districts and the technicians out there to make sure this emergency certification is all about trust. Trust your abilities. Do you think you have the abilities to do that practice, to design it and certify it? It takes a lot of trust for you to know your limits and everything like that. So if you're feeling like you can't meet some of those credentials, reach out and get some help on that. So with that being said, I'm going to share our policy and go through the policy a little bit. I got a few things highlighted. So as I said, we do have BMPs out there that need to be certified. That's in our guidelines. And that has to be certified by a technical service provider staff, SEC staff, could be Penn State staff, PACD staff, any delegated conservation district that may have the credentials, the job approval authority through USDA, NRCS, or anything like that. So just because you have job approval authority doesn't mean you can just go ahead and go ahead and certify these practices, because NRCS will not say that's okay. When you have job approval authority, you're working as an NRCS member, and a lot of times with these projects, you can't do that because these are not NRCS projects, so they won't allow you to use that job approval authority. So we had to set up a temporary approval system, which we're doing that right now. This will be for any conservation professional that wants to design or certify the conservation practices. Like I said, this is just temporary until we get our practice approval system set up. As we stated, this could be a technical service provider, conservation district employee, ACAP program support staff such as SEC, PSU, and PACD. So what's that going to look like? If you have job approval authority within RCS, or if you have any documentation where you've designed any practices or submitted those designs to NRCS and got approved, any documentation like that, we'll take a look at that. You'll submit it to us at the SEC and HRG. HRG will be the ones actually providing the certification, this temporary certification, to get these practices put on the ground. So some of the parameters on that is NRCS job approval authority as of 12/31/2023. So if you have that documentation, submit it, and we can take a look at that. I will say these this temporary certification will be on a project specific basis. So there, each project that you have that you want to design or certify these practices, you'll have to submit for. So if you have 3 different projects out there, you'll have to submit for each project, and that's going to be on a BMP basis. So if there's a project out there that you want to design a heavy use area, and well, I shouldn't say it, like a walkway or a heavy use area, you'll have to submit for both of those, and we'll go through the process of how to do that later on with Jake as he does that. So just write that down. Make sure you're aware that this is a project for project and BMP basis. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to us anytime. I just want to reiterate again that just because we give you an emergency or temporary approval through the system, that does not mean that you have job approval authority. That doesn't mean you can go out and design something else on a different project. You will have to come to us and get the temporary approval for each individual project. There will be a quality assurance and quality control as part of this. That will be conducted through our staff and HRG staff. And I believe Nick will be talking about that right after this. And once again, the emergency temporary approval will cease after we get our practice approval system set up. Jake, is there anything else that we need to talk about as far as policy?
No, I think that pretty much covered it there, Eric. We'll hit into the QA/QC process, go over how we're going to apply for coverage, and then we'll open it up for questions after that.
All right. If there's anybody out there that wants a copy of this policy, we can get you a copy of it. It'd probably be in draft form, but we can give you a copy of it in case you're interested in looking at it. So just let us know. We can get you what you need.
Yeah, I do plan on uploading that to our website with the PowerPoint from today and the webinar recording as well. All right. Thank you. All right. Yeah, as Eric said, next up is Nick with HRG, and he's going to go over some of the workflow and QA/QC process.
Right. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Jake. Hi, everyone. I looked through the people on the call. Looks like I know quite a few people on the call here. I'm Nick from HRG, if you don't know me. Working here with Andy Hibbs and Aaron Latavik to help the center out with what's going on here with the job approval system and then engineering assistance. So the QA/QC overview, we wanted to keep this very similar to if any of you as technicians have had experience in job approval authority with NRCS before, you know the basic process works as such that you work with NRCS and their design tools in order to develop a design package, which you'll submit to NRCS for review. Take photo documentation and notes of the site, and then the checkout documentation at the very end. So really the QA/QC of this is supposed to be very similar to how NRCS were to do things if you were going to give this to your area engineer. So very basically, you'll submit all your design drawings and planning documents that it took you in order to develop that design. So any survey data, any design calculations, um, supply calculations for a water system or whatever it might be, whatever it took you to reach the design decisions that you made in order to design the system that way, you're going to go ahead and submit that to us along with the drawings of what you've worked up for the project. Excuse me. Once we give you approval for that, we'll go ahead and we'll be able to photo document the work on site just to prove that you were out there inspecting things properly, making sure that everything was installed as it should have been as per the designs. You know, fence was installed correctly at the right spacing, post depths, water line depths, whatever it might be, the specific situation with that project. You're going to be submitting proof to us to basically say, yep, nope, it was done correctly. As Jake already and Eric already mentioned there, one spot check will be performed sometime during that project duration to make sure that you do know what's going on and make sure we at least get some eyes on the ground from somebody else to make sure that the project is going well. And then at the very end, we'll go through the checkout documentation and confirm that it meets the NRCS specs. If you guys are aware of the design and check data or the implementation requirement sheets that NRCS uses, in order to certify it to say that it meets NRCS standards, we have to make sure that all of those bullet points were met on those planning documents. So I think that's all I have for QA/QC. Jake, anything else that you see there I need to cover?
Nope, I think that about covers it.
All right, great.
Okay. So what we're going to go into now, we developed a simple, hopefully simple process to apply for coverage for these projects. It's run through a survey kind of platform. And again, this is coverage for individual projects. So you're, as Eric said, you're going to have to apply through this survey platform for each individual project and list out the BMPs that you have the ability to design and construct or provide checkout documentation for. This is the same spot that you're going to include the documentation that you have that describes your experience, so that job approval authority that you have through NRCS or whatever it may be, as well as the project specific information like your conservation plans on these farms, contract data, maybe INEs, project designs, whatever it may be that is that site specific information. And then again, this authorization for coverage will come to you for each individual project, and it'll be communicated with you after you submit through this system. So it's not just automatic. It's not a scenario where, okay, I put my information in, now I'm covered and I can go ahead and finish the design on this project and get it done. There will be an approval that comes afterwards. So this is the link that is for this survey. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat now as well, so you guys have access to that. This link will take you right to the survey, and I just have some screenshots here of the survey for us to run through today to give you an introduction to it. So first up, it's going to ask you, is this a project that contains practices that you're looking for approval for that is fully or partially funded through an ACAP program project? And here is where, if you answer yes, it's either approved and under contract or approved and not quite under contract yet. It's going to advance through the system. But if no, this project is not tied to any ACAP funding, then it'll just automatically advance to the end and let you know that this is not eligible for coverage under the emergency system. And that's primarily just because this SCC has the ability to offer this for only ACAP funded projects and no other projects. So if there's no ACAP funding in it, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use this system. So once you click yes to one of these, whether it's under contract or still in development, it will move through to let you know. I've got things moved on my screen here, sorry. You'll go ahead and put in the name of the individual requesting the approval. So your name here, your affiliation, as well as then listing all the conservation practices that you want to have coverage for, that you want to provide those designs for, or construction checkout documentation, whatever it may be. You may have a scenario where there's more practices in that contract than what you're trying to obtain coverage for. So you would just kind of communicate to us at this point what it is you're interested in. And then you're going to select whether it's a planning and design or construction oversight and practice certification that you're seeking, or both. You can select both of these if you're going to be doing all of it. The next screen will have you uploading any of those planning documents that are associated with the project itself. So that's your Ag E&S plan, grazing plan, manure management plans, etc. And it's set up that you can drag and drop files into the questionnaire, and those will be uploaded to us for review. There's actually 4 spots, so you can include up to 4 different documents in here if you need them. If for some reason you were to need more space than that, you could either combine documents or email us directly to get you set up with more space. Once you've done that, it's going to ask you if you have current or previous NRCS job approval authority, and you'll either select yes, and it'll go to this screen where you will then upload your NRCS job approval documentation, those job sheets that you have. And then you can also in text write any other pertinent information that kind of describes your abilities to plan and implement the conservation practices that you're trying to get coverage for, as well as another space to drop additional files that kind of further reinforce and show HRG and others where, what your abilities are and why you have qualifications to design and implement these practices. Say you did not have NRCS job approval authority and you selected no, it will take you to this screen where you were given the opportunity to upload, what it is that you have as far as qualifications, again, demonstrating your ability to plan, design, or do construction oversight for these practices. There's more spaces for you to drop files in, and also some text boxes for you to describe, the experience that you had, where it came from, how you obtained it, and then, files to kind of back that up. And once you have done all of that, that's the end of the survey. And that is when it automatically logs and triggers emails that come to us at the center, to HRG, and to the State Conservation Commission staff for review. And we'll go ahead and review those documents. Ultimately, HRG is going to be tasked with making sure that the conservation practices that you are requesting coverage for actually align with the job approval that you have or the experience that you have, and everything aligns there. And ultimately, we'll work with the State Conservation Commission to authorize the use of this temporary emergency approval system for you. So with that's all the content we had. We wanted to spend most of our time today just open discussion, questions, things like that. We wanted to be able to have an open discussion. So this is a Zoom meeting versus a webinar. So you guys can either unmute and chime in with your questions. You can use the chat function to ask questions, whatever is more convenient for you, I suppose. There has to be some questions.
Jake, there is one question in the chat already. I'll read it for you just so that it gets into the recording. You mentioned that you need to apply for each practice separately. Why would you list all practices in the box for any given project?
So Eric was correct in the fact that each practice is separately looked at, and your job approval will be evaluated for each individual practice that you are requesting coverage for. However, we're doing this per job. So every individual project, project or contract, however it's actually being submitted to us, you can have multiple different conservation practices in that application. And those, whatever you actually have job approval for through NRCS or experience with designing and doing construction oversight, whatever it may be on, are the only practices you'd be able to seek approval for under this system at this point.
So then we only need to submit one request per project.
Correct.
Okay.
Jake, next question in the chat. Did you say that one of your representatives would need to do a site inspection on these projects? When would you do that?
Yes. Nick, would you like to take that one?
Yep, sure. I think it'll be project by project. So yes, we will need to complete a site inspection on that project at some point in time just to make sure that things are being installed the way that they should be. So for example, if it's a fence project, likely, that fence project, the inspection would come at the end. If it was a water line project where a water line was going in and excavated, we might want to see that project while that pipeline was going in to make sure it's at the right depths. So it's going to be kind of project by project, just based on what is actually going on that site, if that makes sense. And that could be anybody. It might be Penn State staff. It might be an HRGer. I think it'll be whoever's closest and feels comfortable enough to go out there and take a look at it and get eyes on the ground. Does that make sense?
So what would our notification look like for you guys? Just like project start date,
Yeah, Ryan. Yeah, we'll be working with you more one-on-one whenever it comes to this, like on the project, like what is it? We'll probably start communication with you on what's going on, and just trying to determine when it would be best and when we would want to come out and see it. So yeah, it's not going to be a standard system for every project. It's going to be with each technician and just trying to determine when's the best time to come out and see it.
I will just add that under this emergency temporary approval system, the idea is to take away some bottlenecks. So these site visits and stuff that Nick is mentioning are definitely going to be important components to making sure that we get these things in right. And especially for projects that are maybe more technical or larger, longer sections of pipeline, bigger pipeline, for example, things like that. But there may be situations and examples where you're just going to be providing your checkout documentation after the practice is done and certified and installed. And then, at least that once in that contract period, we'd go back out and take a look at that to make sure it was done right for this emergency certification system. And I see there's another question in here about the anticipated time frame for the full practice approval system. And, this is really kind of, it's going to be a way that we can build up towards that full practice approval system. This emergency temporary system, that is. We are working right now on the documents for the pasture management certification. They've been presented to the ACAP work group, and we're working on solidifying and finalizing those documents to be presented back to the State Conservation Commission very soon. So hopefully very soon, midsummer, fall, we'll be organizing trainings around the first part of this practice approval system to start getting folks trained up and into that. And as they said earlier, this emergency certification is serving as a bridge and will ultimately phase out as the practice approval system begins to kick in. But it's going to take some time because we'll have to get folks through the trainings, into the make sure that they've had their designs reviewed. It's going to be very similar to what NRCS's job approval system is and how it looks and acts, and you'll have to submit designs for approval and things like that. And there's probably some opportunity for the designs that come out of the work under this emergency approval to be integrated into this full practice approval system and how it'll be rolled out.
And I'll just add that we don't have any expectation of shutting down this emergency temporary certification until the possibility of someone actually having gone through the full certification is done. So it's not like as soon as that program is launched, there's no option anymore. It will be phasing it out when the reality of having been able to complete the real certification is through. Next question on here, HRG is assuming the liability coverage, correct?
I'll hop in here. So the point of this system is that you guys already have that job approval authority, and as a practitioner, you will actually be signing off on practice under the authority of HRG. So all we're doing here is simply QA/QCing making sure that your existing job approval authority capabilities are sufficient in order to sign off on the practice, and you will be signing off on the practice. HRG will not be providing signatures on those practices.
Right. And we're not asking for any kind of authority on any practice that actually requires a PE seal and stamp.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe to build on that, Eric, would you chime in a little bit though about how the SCC has been given the ability to do this and delegate that, even though necessarily HRG is not signing off on it, like what will be technically available through the full practice approval system, it's still, Eric, if you would chime in on that part of it.
Yeah, through the conservation law, it gives the State Conservation Commission the ability to implement certification process to conservation districts. Like it gives them the authority to sign off on those things to give them certification. So that's part of the reason why we're setting up this system. And eventually, a lot of the harder stuff will be oversaw by HRG or our contracted engineer. That's not in place yet. This is just a temporary service that we can provide.
There's a couple of questions similar about things other than NRCS job approval authority that'll be accepted for approval. The one specific ask is if they have job approval authority for I&E and quality assurance, but not design, but have been actively designing under NRCS, can they submit for emergency authority for design?
I would definitely encourage you to submit for design in that case. If you're comfortable with the practices and the thresholds that you're looking at, again, this is a case-by-case basis. So what you submit will be reviewed by HRG and hopefully, you'll be able to make your case too on why you have the ability to do that. And that's something that we can look at for this emergency system.
So this is Mike Lubinsky from Cumberland County. I have a question. So is it a matter of policy of the program that regardless of what approval or what qualifications you have, that the project has to be submitted through that survey so that you guys have your eyes on it for it to then go through and be approved? In Cumberland County, we have a consulting PE that does our I&Es, our designs, our installation, and our certification. I also have that same credential plus NRCS job approval authority. But as as a policy of the program, do we still have to go through the survey and have the center's eyes on it so that it at some point can then be paid at the end by the program?
No, Mike, you don't have to. I mean, you're a PE, you're looking after that. You're overseeing that project there in the county. So if you're certified as a PE, you'd be good. You don't have to submit it to this. It's just for individuals that don't have a PE stamp or that have job approval authority that want to sign off on these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Take another question came in. Are we allowed to use NRCS grazing plans to implement grazing systems since NRCS cannot help?
Yeah, so I think, this would be a scenario where there's a plan in place, but no NRCS funding there. So it's just ACAP and their staff aren't able to do that. Yes, if you have experience or job approval that is there to help with the practices that are within that plan, absolutely submit them for approval under the system. If you've never done a design on a walkway, but there's a plan there, or maybe the other thing that just came to mind with this question would be a scenario where you have the design plans from NRCS for the conservation practices in the NRCS grazing plan. If that's the case, you're just looking for then checkout documentation. It would be a scenario where, if you've done inspections on these similar types of jobs in the past and you're comfortable with it, you could submit just for that. I don't know if that answered your question, so feel free to elaborate if it did not.
I was waiting to see if Jonathan elaborated or not there. But in the meantime, I did have another question come in. Are we limiting this to less complex practices, fencing, trails, walkways, etc., versus roofed manure storages, for example?
Yes, for sure. Even our full practice approval system, at least at this point in time, will not include any manure storages or roofs and covers at this point. Those really require PE stamps, so we're not looking to provide job or practice approval for those practices. It's going to be basically everything else. And again, very similar to what NRCS has job approval for, thresholds, etc.
Thanks. So then John verified that you did indeed answer his question about the grazing systems.
Yeah.
Eric, did we quote where this comes from in the guidelines? If you did, I missed it. Probably wouldn't hurt for them to see the guidelines and quote that section we're talking about with certifications.
Yeah, I did not quote that, but I can find it and provide it.
Thanks.
Another question, is roof gutters covered under this along with underground outlets?
Yes.
Yeah, it's important to just think about these practices in a way like we already described it. If you have already demonstrated that you have job approval authority through NRCS in order to design and certify these practices and show your competency in order to develop a design and make sure that it's done properly, it's just a case-by-case basic project by project. So whenever, like roof gutters, so if somebody was more comfortable with installing fence, right, and they would feel comfortable with the fence design and making sure that was done, great, and they can show their competency in that. But maybe they can't show their competency or understanding with roof gutters, then maybe perhaps we wouldn't think about that situation.
So Donna's just asking, is the survey system up and running now, and can we start submitting for approvals?
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. I believe you can start submitting for approvals now. We were thinking about seeing what kind of feedback we got from launching this today, and seeing if we need to tweak anything. I haven't heard anything that really is suggesting that at this point, but perhaps there is. There's one suggestion that just came in, I see. But yeah, go ahead and start submitting those now. There may be tweaks to the form moving forward, so it may look a little different between now and the next time you put something in, but it'll still come to the same place. So how do you contact the person submitting for approval when the form does not ask for the information and there is not a back button on the form?
Tom, we know how to reach you. But yeah, all right, we'll take a look at that and make sure that
Well, if you are the person submitting for approval, it does ask for your name.
Yeah.
And affiliation. Tom, so I'm not sure. If you could clarify that there, that might.
Jacob.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Rich with Blair. Hey, if you remember, we had a discussion about 2 months ago regarding a project and submitted everything to you. Do I need to resubmit everything through the online thing, or?
You know, If it's not too much of a lift, Rich, I think that would be really good for you to go ahead and do that. If you guys are super busy, I could maybe do it for you. But I'd like to run it through the system, and this is going to serve as our way to track and think about who we have to follow up with in the fall for projects and QA/QC and all of that. So I was meaning to reach out to you later anyhow about that. So we can connect later if you want, but if you have the time, please do just go ahead and submit those.
Okay, thanks.
Well, the ability to ask questions about this doesn't end here at this webinar. Please reach out. And we'll certainly answer any questions beyond today, but you can continue. We have till the end of the hour. If you're still here, we'll answer questions. Another question for you, Jake. If there's no NRCS involvement on a project and no one has job approval, who approves these projects?
Yeah, so for conservation practices that fall into this category, the more complex ones, definitely you'll have to get an engineer involved to sign off on those practices. If there's things that are maybe a little bit less complex, it's going to be as time allows, but you could reach out to maybe your local state conservation commission resources or folks from the center to see if we can figure out a way to work with you on some of these projects. But I would suspect there's going to be a lot of demand in those scenarios. So that's definitely going to be a case by case basis if we can give assistance on that. Outside of that, it's employing the services of an engineering firm.
Yeah, Jake, it's a good point. This is where the guidelines come into play. If you look at section 9 in your guidelines, everybody should have those. They came with the delegation agreement, but there's a section on project certification, and it basically just says, first off, the applicant has to say the project's done, right? And then the second point is, if it requires certification by a PE, like if it requires by law that BMP be certified by a professional engineer, then it has to be final certified by an engineer. And I think, memory serves me right, it's just liquid manure storage that law requires that. Am I wrong? Or is it roofed heavy use area too, maybe? I think there's only 2, 1 or 2 for sure. So those 2 require an engineer. And if it makes sense for those type BMPs to be signed off by an engineer. And then the last thing says, like, any other BMP that isn't, not required by law can be certified by a technical service provider, staff from district having appropriate job approval authority, NRCS, or any other qualified person who has appropriate training and expertise and is approved by the commission. This is what we're doing, right? The temporary certification is the commission through HRG providing that temporarily as we build out the full certification system, right? That's where this whole thing comes from. So, right there in your guidelines. I think Eric copied it into the chat. Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Okay, Jonathan, I see your question on if staff do not have NRCS job approval, but have 5+ years of experience meeting credentials. Does that meet the credentials for competence? I would again say that it may and it might on several different practices. Definitely encourage you to go ahead and apply through that system, and then we'll take a look at where your competencies are and weigh them against the practices that need to be designed and planned and constructed on your project to see if that works or not, very case by case basis. And that's really why we look for the planning documents that you have up front, like so that we get an understanding of the scope and size of the practices that you're looking to employ this coverage on.
We skipped a question there too when Eric was putting the policy language in the question about the list of practices that require a PE.
Nick, maybe you should hop in here. I'm with Justin. As far as I know, it is a manure storage and roofed heavy use areas that require PE per state regulations to be to sign off on those.
Yeah. And I apologize, just on the fly, I cannot remember. I just don't know. Just to say it accurately on a webinar either. And I just don't want to say something wrong. So
I could add in a little bit. This is Mike Lubinsky again from Cumberland County. As far as I'm aware, the only structures that need to have a PE signed off on are liquid or semi-solid manure storage facilities. And something else to add about a little bit, some of the questions previous to this, as far as the job approval authority goes, if somebody doesn't have the necessary job approval authority per se in writing from NRCS, it may not be because they don't have the experience and other qualifications to have that authority. I know in Cumberland County, through no fault of their own, it was difficult for many years to get my job approval updated. My last one was in 07 because that was one of NRCS's lowest priorities. So there probably are plenty of people out there that have job approval authority charts, but like, they may not have them updated, but do have the adequate competency and experience to do those types of practices. So I'm sure you'll work that out, but just to let you know that sometimes those job approval authority things aren't up to date. And so anyway, back to the original part. I don't believe that roofed heavy use areas by a matter of law or anything need to have a PE on them. Obviously, it's a great idea and we should probably encourage that, but I don't think it's written into the law. It's just liquid and semi-solid storage facilities.
Great, thank you for that. And thank you for your earlier point too about NRCS job approval authority. And that's definitely a good one. We anticipate that. And that's why there is, that alternative documentation that you could submit. If it wasn't the job approval, up-to-date job approval form, you could show some of the practices that you have worked on in the past or talk about those experiences.
I see a question came in again about liability for this process. The commission delegates our authority through a delegation agreement to all county conservation districts that accepted that delegation agreement. So as long as you as a county are acting within guidelines and your delegation agreement, you are acting under the authority of the State Conservation Commission. And we provide the legal backing for that. That's the point of a delegation agreement. So who assumes the liability? I would assume if you're in line with your delegation, the commission and the Department of Ag assumes that liability. If you're acting outside of that, maybe the liability is on you, but I can't answer that without a court case. So that's the point of a delegation agreement. We're delegating our authority and you're working under commission and PDA authority to do these things. That makes sense? An answer that, I hope.
Any other thoughts at this point? Well, like Jen mentioned, that you feel free to reach out to us with any questions. The survey link was put in there. It is live, and we'll take a look at that form again to make sure it's asking everything that we want it to. Feel free to start filling it out and sending your requests our way. We'll do our best to get them in a timely fashion back to you and get you the coverages that you need to get your projects on the ground.
And then we'll follow up this presentation with a email with the recording link and that link to the survey and the policy document about this emergency temporary certification. We'll get that out to all of the counties or delegations for ACAP.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I will give you back 15 minutes of your life now. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, everybody.